Part 1. Ada for refusing to be my sister's maid of honor after I recognized her fiancé from a missing person case. I'm writing this with the kind of pit in my stomach you get right before you're about to crash your bike. Either I'm about to save my sister from the worst mistake of her life, or I'm the jealous little sister who's going to be that girl everyone gossips about for the next decade. There is no in-between in Harbor's Edge. We're a small coastal town where the water's always cold, the tourists stay on the boardwalk, and the locals take their drama to the parking lot behind O'Malley's after last call. People remember what you did in 7th grade and bring it up at your wedding toast. That kind of place. I'm 27, my sister Lena is 32, and her fiancé Colin, 35, moved here about a year ago. My sister is the dependable type A one. She runs the front desk at the clinic, color codes her calendar, and never leaves a text unread. After our mom died 5 years ago, Lena basically became everyone's emergency contact. She's the person you call when your car won't start or you need soup at 2 a.m. I'm the one you call if your oven is smoking because I'm the baker at the Harbor House Cafe, and I always know where the fire extinguisher is. I liked Colin at first because he made Lena laugh. That's not a small thing. He came into the cafe last fall and ordered a cappuccino and a slice of my pear cardamom cake, took one bite, and did this little double take like he'd discovered a secret. He came back 3 days in a row, always leaving a ridiculous tip and a book on the counter like he wanted me to ask about it. I never did. I'm annoying like that. He's one of those guys who looks like a J. Crew catalog and a fisherman's Instagram collided. Nice sweaters, salt and pepper scruff, hands that looked used to rope and cold water. He said he was a marine surveyor helping a charter outfit evaluate hull damage after a storm. He said he'd been everywhere and nowhere, like people say when they don't want to explain. Lena went from this guy is funny to this guy is the one in about 2 months. It happens fast when your friends are already having second babies and you're staring at the same ceiling you painted during the pandemic. She's always wanted a family, and I think part of her wanted it for our mom too. When Colin proposed on the pier at Golden Hour, the photographer just happened to be there. I was happy for her. Everyone was. The photo went up on Facebook and got a couple hundred likes, even from people who haven't liked anything since 2016. My aunt commented, finally, like she hadn't told me last Christmas that Lena was too picky for her own good. Then this winter, weird little things started pinging my radar. 1. I noticed Colin always steered conversations away from his past. Not like a normal guarded person, like someone waltzing around landmines. If you asked where he grew up, he'd say, "Oh, all over, my dad moved for work," and then pivot to ask you about your dog. If you asked where he lived before Harbor's Edge, he'd list cities, Savannah, Wilmington, a winter in Newport, like he was reading off a coastal road trip he once took. He made fun of social media like a boomer, but he's 35. I prefer to be present, he said, when Lena teased him for not having Instagram. Meanwhile, he knew every lens on my camera better than I did. 2. I saw a thin scar behind his left ear when he bent to tie his boot at the cafe, the kind of neat surgical line you get from something specific. It stuck in my brain like a splinter because I know scars. Bakers collect them like seashells. This one wasn't a kitchen accident. 3. A tourist came in on Memorial Day weekend, a woman with sunburned shoulders and a Yale sweatshirt that made her look like someone's aunt. She was standing at the counter when Lena and Colin walked in. I watched the woman's face do this tiny freeze. She blinked, smiled stiffly, and asked if we had oat milk. When Colin turned his head, she looked at his profile the way people look at storm clouds offshore, not wanting to panic, but calculating. After they left, she asked me, too casual, if those two were locals. I said, "She is. He's new." The woman's mouth twisted. She left me a 20 for a $12 order and said, "Enjoy your summer." You don't forget that kind of weird tip attached to that kind of weird face. I told myself I was being paranoid. People come to Harbor's Edge to try on new selves all the time. We're a town where seasonal people reinvent themselves every June. Then last week happened. Lena asked me to be her maid of honor 2 months ago, and I said yes because of course I did. I bought the dress, sage green, not my color, I look like an undercooked pea, and started planning a low-key bachelorette that didn't involve penis straws. We were at the cafe after closing last Wednesday, sitting under the ceiling fan with the big spreadsheet. Lena had Sharpies. I had 2 lemon bars and a bowl of chocolate chips for morale. Colin came in late, sunburned, smelling like salt water. He dropped a kiss on the top of her head like he owned the spot and sat sideways in the chair like he owned the room. Venue deposit is due Friday, Lena said, tapping her list, and we still have to finalize the seating chart. Put all the weird uncles together, Colin said. He grinned at me. No offense, Maya. My weird uncle died, I said, deadpan. Colin laughed like I'd told a joke. Lena rolled her eyes and threw a chocolate chip at me. Normal, warm, easy. He asked if I could make a 3-tier carrot cake with candied citrus for the wedding because that's what his mother made for his birthdays. I didn't know he ever called his mother. He never mentions family. I tucked that away with the other details, the ones I collected accidentally, like receipts found in pockets before laundry. He left his jacket draped over the chair when they went to check the parking meter. It slid off and a small leather wallet fell out. Not his regular wallet, a thin, old-fashioned card case that looked used and loved. I bent to pick it up. Yes, I know how this sounds. Read the whole thing before you judge me. A business card had slipped out. It wasn't a business card. It was one of those little appointment reminders from Bayview Dental. A place I know because I used to date the receptionist's brother. Small towns are incestuous like that. The name was handwritten, Evan Grant. The date was 6 months ago. Colin's last name is Hart. His first name is Colin. No middle initial E. I know because I ordered the stupid custom champagne flutes with his and Lena's initials. There was a patient number on the card. My stomach did that bike crash thing again. I put the card back in the case and slid it into the jacket pocket like it never happened. When they came back in, I was probably making a face because Lena peered at me. You okay? Headache, I said, and poked the lemon bars. Sugar helps. I went from maybe there's a reasonable explanation to stalking the internet like a raccoon in a dumpster. I tried to find an Evan Grant with Colin's face and got lost in 47 LinkedIns that belonged to men who looked like substitute teachers. Nothing in Harbor's Edge, nothing in Savannah or Newport either, but lots of Evans in Wilmington. I searched more than I should have, the way you scratch a bug bite you know you'll regret. At 2 a.m., I found it. A thread on a small old true crime forum, the kind with a Navy background and default avatars. It was about a woman named Renee Myers, missing from a marina town in North Carolina 5 years ago. She was 28. The last photo posted of her was at a 4th of July party. You can see her in front of a dock, laughing with someone off camera. The thread said her boyfriend at the time cooperated, and then moved states within a month. The boyfriend's first name? Evan. Last name redacted by the mod due to legal reasons. One poster insisted Evan used a different last name in different towns, maybe because of old debt, maybe because he was sketchy. Another said he worked on boats. The kind of guy who could untie a knot with his eyes closed. There was a blurry screenshot of a marina staff page. The guy in the photo had the same jawline as Colin and the same scar behind his left ear. I didn't sleep. I lay there listening to the gulls shriek and the train whistle float over from the mainland, and told myself I was doing the thing I always do, taking a little weirdness and pouring gasoline on it. I tried to picture the look on Lena's face when I said, "Hey, your fiancé might be using a fake name," and it made bile climb my throat. I could be wrong. People can share bone structure and haircuts and scars. Why was I ready to ruin my sister's life over a blurry image on a suspicious forum? The next morning, Colin showed up at the cafe before we opened, like he sometimes does when he's taking the boat out early. He brought me a bag of fresh blueberries from a guy at the marina and leaned on the counter like we were friends. "Can I steal Lena tonight?" he asked. "I want to take her to the lighthouse." "Not mine to give," I said. "She's got her own keys." He grinned. "You're her gatekeeper." "More like her bouncer," I said, because that's our bit. He slid a 20 into the tip jar even though he wasn't buying anything and looked at me in this way that made me weirdly aware of my heartbeat. Not flirty, not creepy, just on. Like he was taking a Polaroid of me in his head. His left ear caught the morning light and the scar was clear as a fishing line. He reached up to scratch behind it with a finger, and when he saw where my eyes had landed, he said, "Casual. Surgery when I was 14. Mastoiditis. Gross stuff. You don't want to know." I hadn't asked. I told myself to stop. But later, after we opened, I saw a message in the cafe's Facebook inbox. We get random stuff, catering requests, spam, a guy trying to sell us bespoke muffins. This one said, "Hi, sorry to message a business. I'm trying to reach Maya. It's about someone I recognized in your photos. Urgent." The profile pic was a beach at sunset, no face. I should have ignored it. My boss would murder me for using the cafe page for personal drama. I clicked anyway. The message continued. "I think your sister's fiancé is someone I knew as Evan in Wilmington. Please call me." There was a phone number with a North Carolina area code. The name on the profile was MD. Not helpful. I stared at it for a full minute, my hands suddenly cold even though the ovens were on. I replied with just, "Who are you?" And the 3 dots appeared like a heartbeat. Then, "I won't type anything here, I can prove it. Please call." I didn't call. I screenshotted, then paced behind the counter until I nearly wore a track in the tile. Then I did the next worst thing. I looked up Renee Myers again and found a Facebook group with 213 members and posts from her mother that made me want to sit down on the floor and cry. A few days before the last post, someone had shared a tip line, then silence. The top pinned post had a list of known facts, including boyfriend, Evan, 30M in 2020, moved to Coastal MA the month after, said he got a job, didn't leave forwarding address. My chest felt tight. Coastal MA is very big and also not big at all when you can smell low tide from your bedroom. I tried to call Lena, no answer, clinic hours. I tried to call the number in my messages. It rang 3 times and went to voicemail. A woman's voice, low and a little hoarse. "This is M, leave a message." I hung up because I'm a coward when it counts. Then I texted Lena, "Can you swing by the cafe after work? Need to talk." Not an emergency, but important. She sent back a thumbs up and a heart. I almost threw up. At 5, she walked in with her tote bag and that end-of-day droop in her shoulders. I took her to the office in the back, which is really a glorified closet with a window that looks at a cinder block wall. I said it fast, like ripping off duct tape. "I found something about Colin and I don't know what to do." Her face did this flicker. Worry, then irritation, then big sister mode. "Okay," she said slowly, putting her bag down. "Tell me." I told her about the dental card, the scar, the forum, the message. I showed her the screenshot. I told her I might be wrong, and I hoped I was wrong. The whole time she watched me like I was a patient explaining symptoms that sounded like Google chasing. When I finished, she took a long breath. "So," she said carefully, "you think my fiancé is lying about his name and was involved with a missing woman based on an old forum thread and a dentist appointment for an Evan? Do you hear how that sounds?" "Yes," I said, because I did. I sounded like Harbor's Edge in one sentence. Nosy, bored, a little cruel. But I can't shake it. "We can ask him," she said, like it was that simple. She reached for her phone. "Please don't," I blurted. "Not yet. Let me check first. I got a message. If it's nothing, if this is a random, then you can, I don't know, yell at me, uninvite me. But if it's not nothing, Lena, I can't watch you." I broke off because my throat closed. Wordless, ugly crying is not persuasive. She softened. She always does. She reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. "You think you're protecting me," she said. "I believe that's why you're doing this. But you're asking me to keep a possible, whatever this is, from the person I'm about to marry." "I know." The words felt like pebbles. "I know." She was quiet for a long beat, then nodded. "You have 48 hours, she said. Find facts, not vibes. After that, we go to him together. If you don't have anything concrete, you are going to apologize and you are going to stand next to me in that ugly dress and smile like you mean it." I nodded. Relief and panic slammed into each other and knocked me sideways. "Okay." She stood, grabbed her tote, leaned down, and kissed my hair the way she's done since I was 5. "I love you," she said. "Try not to set our lives on fire unless you're sure." When she left, I took a deep breath and called the number. It rang once, twice. Then the same low voice answered. "Hello?" "Hi," I said, suddenly 13 again and calling a crush. "This is Maya. You messaged about Colin." Silence. The kind that hums. Then, "I knew him as Evan," she said. "And if he's engaged to your sister, you need to listen very carefully." She told me her name. She told me how she knew him. She told me a detail I couldn't unknow. Something about a chipped tooth on the left, on the back molar, from when he got hit with a winch line. She told me he'd had it fixed last winter, at Bayview Dental. "Who are you to him?" I asked, my voice gone thin. "I'm the person who left," she said. "And I should have left sooner, but that's not the worst of it." I wrote everything down with a pen that kept stuttering. When I hung up, I went to the front to get some water, and that's when the bell over the door chimed. Colin walked in, easy smile, hands shoved in his jacket pockets like a magazine ad. He looked at me like he could read the page I'd just written. "Hey, gatekeeper," he said. "Got a minute?" My mouth felt like it had been packed with cotton. I nodded, because that's all I could do. He stepped closer. He smelled like ocean and the sharp, clean soap Lena buys at the co-op. "I found something of yours in my jacket," he said, holding up a little rectangle between two fingers. It was the screenshot I thought I'd safely emailed to myself. Not possible. Except it was. My handwriting on the back where I'd jotted a phone number. He smiled without showing his teeth. "We should talk." I didn't move. My brain was doing that thing where it tries to process two incompatible realities at once. One where I was standing in the cafe with my sister's fiancé holding physical proof that I'd been snooping on him, and another where I was watching this from somewhere else. Safe, like a bad indie thriller I could turn off. Colin, or Evan, or whatever, set the paper on the counter and leaned in just slightly. Not enough for anyone walking by to think we were having a fight, but enough that I caught the cool, steady look in his eyes. He didn't look angry. He didn't even look curious. He looked like someone cataloging a variable. "You've been busy," he said. I forced myself to pick up the paper like it was no big deal, like I just found a dropped grocery list. "I run a cafe," I said. "I'm always busy." His mouth twitched. "Cute, but I'm serious. That number? That's trouble." I wanted to say, "So are you," but my voice was glued somewhere between my lungs and my teeth. Instead, I swallowed and went with, "Who is she?" That was the first time I saw a crack in his expression. It wasn't much, a flicker of something in his jaw, but it was enough to make my stomach tighten. "She's no one you need to be talking to," he said, still quiet. "She's not stable." I almost laughed because it was so textbook. The crazy ex defense. "She knew about your tooth," I said, lowering my voice. "The one you had fixed at Bayview. She knew the date." For the first time, his gaze broke from mine. Not for long, maybe half a second, but enough for me to know he hadn't expected me to have details. "Maya." My name came out slow, deliberate. "If you have questions, you ask me. Not strangers, not people with agendas." "What about Lena?" I asked. "Should I tell her I found a different name in your jacket? Should I tell her people from your past are messaging me?" That time, the jaw muscle ticked twice. "You should tell her you've been poking into things you don't understand." I hated how calm he sounded, like he had the higher ground and I was the one flailing. Before I could answer, the front door opened again and Mrs. Keegan from the florist breezed in with her big sun hat, calling out for an iced chai. Colin straightened immediately, smile back in place, all easy warmth. "I'll let you get back to work," he said, and walked toward the door. Over his shoulder, he added, "Let's keep this between us for now. No reason to worry your sister." The bell chimed and he was gone. I barely remember finishing Mrs. Keegan's drink. My hands were shaking so badly I spilled chai concentrate all over the counter. After she left, I locked the front door for my break and went back to the office. The number MD had given me was still on the paper. I called again. This time she picked up on the second ring. "He knows I called you," I said, without introduction. She didn't sound surprised. "Of course he does. He always knows." Something in her voice, the exhaustion maybe, made the hairs on my arms rise. "What did he do to you?" I asked. She laughed once, short and humorless. "That's not the question. The question is what he's going to do to your sister if you don't stop him." My throat went dry. Stop him from what? There was a pause, like she was deciding how much to give me. Renee wasn't the first. She might not have been the last. I don't know where she is. I just know she's gone, and that man doesn't stick around anywhere for long. The room tilted. Are you saying? I'm saying you should take your sister and leave town. Tonight. I wanted to dismiss her as paranoid, but the thing was, her voice didn't sound like paranoia. It sounded like someone who'd lived with the kind of fear you can taste in your teeth. I have 48 hours, I said. That's all she gave me. 48 hours is a long time for him, she said. Be careful what you do with it. Before I could press for more, she hung up. That night, I couldn't sit still. I paced my apartment until my upstairs neighbor banged on the floor with a broom handle. At one point, I thought about just walking to Lena's house and blurting it all out. But I could still hear her voice in my head. Facts, not vibes. So I made a decision. If I was going to confront Colin, I was going to do it with something solid. And that meant going to the marina. It was nearly midnight when I parked my beat-up Honda near Dock C. The water was black glass under the pier lights, and the mast swayed like skeletal fingers. Colin's boat, the Grey Gull, was moored at the far end, its cabin light glowing faintly. I told myself I was just going to look. Maybe see if there were papers, IDs, something with Evan Grant on it. I had no plan for if he was actually inside. Halfway down the dock, I heard footsteps. Slow, unhurried, coming toward me from the opposite end. I ducked behind a stack of lobster traps, my pulse in my ears. The footsteps stopped. Then, from somewhere close, too close, I heard his voice. Maya. The dock planks creaked under my sneakers, every sound amplified by the dark. I pressed my back against the rough, salt-wet stack of traps and told myself to breathe quieter, to be smaller. My pulse didn't get the memo. Maya, he said again, closer this time. His footsteps weren't cautious. They weren't feeling their way. They were the footsteps of someone who knew exactly where everything was, who was used to the give of these boards, the pattern of this night. I thought about running. I thought about how sound carries across water, and how if I sprinted, the boards would telegraph my flight. I thought about how stupid it was to come here at midnight alone. A small cone of light swept past my hiding place and landed on the traps across from me. He had a flashlight, and he was being polite about it, not shining it into the boats where people might be sleeping, just skimming the edges like he didn't want to spook a cat. He stopped 2 feet from my shoes. You dropped this, he said, and held out his other hand. My phone. The glass reflected the pier light, a small star in his palm. How? I'd put it in my back pocket. I patted, felt only denim and my own stupid shaking. I'm assuming you were filming, he went on. Good instinct, bad form. He offered a small smile, the one he uses on tourists who fumble with change. Want to come out where we can talk without you looking like a raccoon? I stepped out, because what else was I going to do? Let him keep narrating my humiliation. I reached for the phone. He didn't give it back. He clicked off the flashlight and the world narrowed to the sodium glow of the pier lamps and the soft clink of masts. I'm not going on your boat, I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Good, he said. I wasn't going to ask. He leaned a hip against a piling and looked past me at the water like we were neighbors about to chat about tide charts. You've got 48 hours, right? Before you tell Lena whatever it is you think you're going to tell her. My mouth went dry. She told you. He looked back at me, amused. No, you told me. Today, with your face. He tapped the side of his own. You still believe you're hard to read. It's almost sweet. I'm not sweet, I said. And you need to stop pretending this is some meet cute where I'll laugh and you'll explain and we'll all go home and eat cake. He shrugged. I like carrot cake, but okay. Explanations. He slipped the phone into his jacket pocket like it was a mutual decision and crossed his arms. You found a card with the name Evan Grant. You found a forum about a missing woman named Renee. You got a call from a woman who knew me as Evan and told you to run. You recognized the scar and you probably found a dozen almost matching faces at a dozen almost matching marinas. You think I'm lying about who I am and what I've done. That about right? You're missing the part where you took my phone, I said. He tilted his head. Borrowed. And I'll give it back when you stop recording me. I wasn't, I said automatically, and then shut my mouth because that was exactly the kind of stupid lie he liked to make me tell. He said, "Okay," softly, and the word unfurled between us like a rope. Do you want my version, or do you want to keep collecting breadcrumbs from strangers who have a reason to hate me? Why would someone have a reason to hate you if you didn't? I stopped before I finished the sentence with "do something worth hating." The gulls cried once, high and thin. Because I left, he said. Because I didn't give them what they wanted. Because I changed my name. Because I'm good at changing my name. He smiled without warmth. You get to be a villain to someone. It's like weather. Who were you to Renee? I said. Each word felt like stepping onto a board I wasn't sure would hold. He looked out at the dark line where the river widened into the harbor. For a moment, I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, "A mistake." The water lapped hard against a hull. Somewhere down dock, a rope groaned. I waited. She was beautiful, he said, voice thinner now. The kind of beautiful that makes rules bend around it. We worked on the same dock in Wilmington for a summer. She liked the wrong men. I was, at the time, very good at being the wrong man. What happened to her? I asked. He inhaled. I don't know. A beat. And that's true whether you believe it or not. I wanted to say I didn't. He kept going. I left because the cops were looking at me for something they had no evidence for, except that I happened to be the last person documented arguing with her. They asked bad questions and worse ones. They didn't charge me because there was nothing to charge, but they made it clear I'd be a convenient answer if they ran out of patience. He flicked a look at me. So I got out. Changed your name, I said. He nodded. I'd already been using two. That's the part you haven't asked about, because you think it means only one thing. And what does it mean? It means I have a father who taught me some things a boy shouldn't know how to do by the time he's 8, he said. The words were flat as a tide table. One of those things was leave. Another was not let people find you when you don't want to be found. The excuse lodged in my throat before I could decide if I believed it. I pictured a man's shadow in a doorway and a small boy counting locks. What's your real name? I asked. He smiled. You start believing in real names, you lose. That's not an answer, I said. It's the truest one you'll get tonight, he said, then shifted, like he was done with the preamble. So, the woman who called you, she told you to run? Yes. Did she tell you she once tried to set my boat on fire? He asked, mild as tea. Or that she called my boss at a survey job and said I'd stolen engines off another boat? Or that she's threatened to show up at people's houses with flyers? She said she left, I said. Like it took bravery to get away from you. That part is probably true, he said. To leave me, you have to get away from the person you were around me. And some people can't. You're very good at this, I said. At sounding reasonable. I'm very good at telling the truth if it keeps me out of jail, he said, and the honesty in that made my stomach lurch. Do you want to hear the rest, or are we done? Somewhere behind him, on the dark water, a boat engine coughed to life, then died. The night felt like it had moved a fraction closer. Say it, I said. Renee had a cousin, he said. Mara. She prefers initials, but she's not subtle. She's been looking for an answer that will never satisfy her, because grief is a mouth that never fills. She decided I was the answer. She's followed me off and on for years. She says she's trying to protect other women. Maybe she thinks she is. Maybe she even did, once. But mostly she's loud. He gave me a look that wasn't quite pity. She's the one who called you. The initials, the voice. A piece clicked into a place I didn't want. You think MD is Mara? I don't think, he said. I know. How do you know I'd talk to her? How do you always know? The frustration in my voice made it waver. I hated that he heard it. He tapped his pocket where my phone was. Lock screen notification. You didn't turn previews off. My face flushed hot. He had seen the message. Maybe more. I tasted metal. You've been dating my sister for a year, I said. Were you planning to tell her any of this ever? Your trail of names, your missing ex, your... Mara? Yes, he said, and it was so quick, so calm, that I almost believed him. I don't tell people I love things that will get them hurt until I know they can survive them. That is so generous, I said. The sarcasm came out serrated. He laughed softly. Do you know what I liked about the first time I came into your cafe? He asked, sudden as a wave slapping the pilings. You didn't ask me anything. You didn't perform curiosity to bank a favor. You just gave me cake and change and a look that said, I don't care who you are if you don't make my life harder. I thought, maybe I can be that person here. You can't, I said, because you make people's lives harder just by standing in them. My hands had curled into fists without me noticing. He reached into his jacket, and my body moved before my brain did. A step back, weight on my heels. He held up both palms. Slowly, he pulled out my phone and offered it to me like an animal he didn't want to startle. Here, he said. You can keep your footage of me staring off into the middle distance. I snatched it, immediately swiped to check the recording. It had started and stopped at some point on my hip as I crouched, capturing a long audio stretch of my own panicked breathing, the hiss of water, his voice saying my name. A burst of light swept across us. Bright, cold, official. We both turned. Harbor patrol. An aluminum skiff ghosting between the slips. The beam lingered a second on our faces. I lifted a hand. The officer gave a small salute, then moved on. My shoulders dropped a notch. Colin's shoulders didn't move. Go home, he said. Sleep. Tell Lena whatever you're going to tell her in 47 hours. Or don't. But stop meeting strangers on docks. Stop being the kind of person who requires it, I said, and brushed past him. I'd made it 5 steps when he said, too softly, check your messages before you go. The hair at the nape of my neck prickled. I glanced down. A new text lit my screen from an unknown number, time-stamped 1 minute ago. It was a photo. A live photo. It pulsed once when I touched it, the frame shifting by a hair. The image was me, crouched behind the lobster traps, taken from behind and above, as if from the deck of a boat 2 slips over. My blue hoodie, my cheap ponytail. The corner of my phone sticking out of my back pocket just before it disappeared. My stomach turned to sleet. I looked up. Across the way, on a dark boat with no name painted on the stern, a shape shifted. Just the suggestion of a person. Then nothing. Colin watched me see it. Mara, he said. Not a question. The way someone says fog. If she's following me, why wouldn't she make herself known? I asked. Why not come say the lines you fed me, she'd say. Why the spycraft? Because she's impatient, he said, and she thinks fear works faster than reason. I couldn't tell which one he thought he was using on me. You said you weren't going to ask me onto your boat, I said. But you brought me here to show me this. He stared at me for a second, then shook his head like I'd just flubbed a recipe. No, Maya, I came because you were here. I came because I didn't want you to be alone with any of this, even if you hate me. He glanced over my shoulder at the nameless boat. And because I didn't want her to get what she wanted. What does she want? To watch you walk into the worst version of yourself, he said. The one where you set the people you love on fire because it makes you feel heroic. He met my eyes. Don't give her that. It was so unfair. The way he could say the thing I fear most and make it sound like a kindness. I wanted to slam every word back into his chest. Instead, I put the phone in my pocket and said, if you were any kind of decent, you'd call the number on the pinned post in Renee's group and tell them everything you know. I already did, he said. 3 years ago, twice. It buys me a month of quiet and then the storm finds a new direction. Then you won't mind if I call, I said. He smiled. I won't mind at all. I turned to go. The wind had picked up. The halyards clinked faster, a nervous heartbeat. Wait, he said. I didn't. Maya, he said again, closer now. I stopped because some part of me always does when someone uses my name like that. He reached into his other pocket and pulled out a thin leather case, the card holder I'd seen fall from his jacket in the cafe. He opened it, flipped past the Bayview reminder card with Evan Grant in that easy, cursive hand, and drew out a laminated badge. It said, Massachusetts Maritime Contractors Association, Temporary Contractor, C. Hart. Next was a North Carolina boater's license. E. Hartwell. Then a faded library card. E. Grant, expired last summer, a photo that looked like him and also like a cousin you'd only met once. The last thing he showed me was a medical card with surgical scribble. Hartwell, C. Mastoidectomy, L. Age 14. The same scar, formalized. So which one is real? I asked. He put them away carefully. All of them. That's the point. I hated how much it made sense and how little it helped. Lena is going to ask me if you're safe, I said. What do I tell her? He considered that. Tell her I am the safest place I know how to be, he said quietly. And that sometimes that isn't very safe at all. I walked away because I couldn't stand there anymore, holding both versions of him in my hands like they were stones I had to choose to drown with. At the end of the dock, the gravel of the parking lot felt too loud under my feet. By the time I reached my car, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Another live photo. This time, it was the back door of my apartment, taken from the alley, the light over the stoop burned out like it's always been. When I pressed, the photo moved, my silhouette crossing the kitchen window unaware. I didn't go home that night. I drove to the only place in town with neon at all hours and a security camera that worked. The 24-hour laundromat, the one with the faded mural of whales and a soda machine that steals quarters. I texted Lena, I'm sorry. Staying at the laundromat a while. Long story, we'll tell you everything tomorrow. I love you. She sent back 3 question marks and a WTF and then call me, and I stared at my phone until the dots stopped. At 2:30 a.m., the laundromat door chimed. A woman walked in with a canvas tote and eyes like she'd misplaced every good night of sleep years ago. She sat 2 machines down from me, dumped in a load, and didn't look over. Her hair was pulled under a cap, but her jaw was familiar from a tiny avatar and a missing person post. Younger there, softer. I didn't have to ask her name. She didn't have to ask mine. We watched the washers spin for a minute, the clothes slapping glass like small waves. You shouldn't have met him on the dock, she said, without hello. Her voice was the same low rasp from the phone. He's better there. He has home field. Then why were you there? I asked. To make sure you didn't end up in the water, she said, simple as a grocery list. He likes control. Sometimes control slips. Are you Mara? I asked. The name tasted like guilt and salt. She winced, like I'd said accident in a hospital waiting room. I'm Michelle, she said. Michelle Duval. Mara is what the people who blame me call me. Blame you for what? For not being there the night my cousin disappeared. She met my eyes then, and the grief in them had a shape, an old, hard edge. For not stopping the man she couldn't stop herself from loving. My mouth had gone dry again. He says you tried to set his boat on fire. She didn't look away. I did, she said, because I wanted him to feel 1 minute of what it's like to watch something you love burn. The washer beeped. We didn't move. He says you're manipulating me, I said. He says fear is your tool. And what does he use? She asked, voice very quiet. Cake and tone? I thought of his hand offering my phone, the way he said my name, the small honesty in the big lie. You want me to run? I said. But I can't. She gave me 48 hours. Michelle nodded like she'd expected that. Then use them, she said. She slid something across the plastic chair between us, a Ziploc with paper inside folded to show a corner of a photo. I brought you proof he exists outside of his stories. I hesitated, then took it. Inside was a photocopy of a marina accident report from 5 years ago, a winch line whipping, an injury documented as a laceration behind the left ear, employee E. Grant, supervisor signature illegible. Clipped to it with a rusted paperclip was a printout of a Facebook photo. Not Renee, but a group shot at a 4th of July party. A shadow of a man half turned away at the edge. The line of his jaw like a thing you could draw from memory. "Look at the bracelet," Michelle said. I leaned in. On the wrist of the woman laughing at the center, Renee, a small silver charm hung. An initial. At first I thought R, but the angle caught the light and it was an H. The same font as the charm on the keychain I'd seen on Lena's kitchen counter last week. The one Colin said he'd bought her to match mine. I felt a coldness at the base of my skull, a wrongness spiraling. "I can't prove what he did," Michelle said. "But I can prove he does the same moves in every town. He gifts a piece of his name. He talks about scars like they're credentials. He collects women who think they're exceptions." I swallowed. Maybe he keeps the same rituals because he's the same person, not because he's a chameleon. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe being the same person is his camouflage?" Outside, a train's horn cut across the wet dark. I pictured the dock, the nameless boat, the way the live photos pulsed like tiny living things. I pictured Lena's sage dress hanging by the window, and our mother's ring on the nightstand waiting to be borrowed. "Why me?" I asked. "Why message the cafe page and not go straight to her?" "Because you look like someone who knows what it's like to be believed only if you bring receipts," Michelle said. "And because people like your sister don't listen to strangers until their sisters make them." The dryer buzzed somewhere behind us. Neither of us moved. "Tomorrow," Michelle said, standing, shouldering her tote without taking her wash. "Go to the storage unit behind Bayview Dental, the one they rent out to the marina guys. He keeps a lockbox there. If you can get him to open it, you'll know more than you want." "How do you know that?" I asked. But she was already at the door. "I know how he tucks away the things he won't let go of," she said over her shoulder. "And where he thinks no one will look." The door chimed. The neon whale in the window flickered once and held. I sat alone with the photocopies and the hum of the spin cycle and the clock on my screen inching toward morning. I wanted to text Lena everything and nothing. I wanted to leave town and also set it on fire. Instead, I stared at the H on the bracelet until the letter unhooked and became just a shape, and I tried to imagine a version of the next day where I didn't make the worst mistake of my life. The laundromat clock read 5:12 a.m. when I gave up on the idea of sleep. My brain was vibrating, half with exhaustion, half with the sick adrenaline that comes when you know you're about to do something that can't be undone. I drove home with the sun just starting to bruise the horizon, parking 2 blocks away in case the nameless boat's silhouette was still somewhere watching. My apartment smelled like coffee grounds and the faint lemon of the floor cleaner I'd used last week. Safe smells. I showered, but it didn't rinse off the unease. Every creak in the pipes felt like a footstep. At 8:30, Lena called. I let it ring twice before picking up. "You're alive," she said. She tried to make it sound light, but there was an edge in her voice. The one she uses when she's balancing patience and irritation. "You're going to tell me why you spent the night in a laundromat?" "Not over the phone," I said. "We need to meet, without Colin." She exhaled, sharp. "You're not making this easy." "It's not easy," I said. There was a pause, and then, "Fine. My lunch break, Harbor Park, bring coffee." By 11:50, I was sitting on one of the weathered benches under the big elm in Harbor Park, 2 lattes in a cardboard tray. The air smelled like low tide, the kind of briny tang that sticks to your hair. Lena arrived in her clinic scrubs, her hair pulled back tight, sunglasses hiding her eyes. She sat, took the coffee. "Talk." I slid Michelle's photocopies across the bench between us. She picked them up, flipped through the report and the photo, her brow furrowing behind the lenses. "What am I looking at?" "An accident report for someone named Evan Grant," I said. "Scar behind the left ear, same time frame he was in Wilmington, and a photo from the night Renee disappeared. Look at the bracelet." She leaned in, squinting. "It's an H. He gave you one just like it." She didn't react right away. Just stared at the photo, then set it down carefully, like it might explode. "You're saying he gave it to her, too?" "I'm saying it's not just a bracelet," I said. "It's part of a pattern." Her jaw tightened. This came from the woman who messaged you? Yes. Her name's Michelle. She's Renee's cousin. And you believe her? I hesitated. I believe parts of her, and I believe she's scared of him. That doesn't mean he did anything to Renee, Lena said, her voice low, like she was talking herself through the logic. No, I said, but it means he's been lying about more than just his name. She leaned back, sipping her coffee, sunglasses still on, which made it impossible to read her eyes. You know what this feels like? It feels like you're handing me a puzzle with half the pieces missing and telling me to set my life on fire over it. I'm telling you not to marry him until we have the whole picture, I said. That's all. She was quiet for a long beat, then glanced at her watch. I have to get back. 48 hours, remember? You've got until tomorrow night. She stood, tucking the papers into her tote. And Maya, if this blows up because of a story that isn't true, you're the one who's going to have to live with it. She walked away without looking back. The storage unit behind Bayview Dental was a squat row of corrugated metal doors in a gravel lot, half hidden behind a stand of cedar trees. I parked on the street, heart doing a fast stutter, and watched for 15 minutes. No one came or went. Michelle had said, get him to open it, but the thought of asking Colin for anything made my skin crawl. So I tried the low-stakes approach first, walking over, testing the padlock. Solid, not the flimsy kind. I was about to turn back when I heard an engine. A silver pickup turned into the lot, tires crunching on gravel. Colin. I ducked behind the cedar line, crouching low. He got out wearing his usual faded sweatshirt and jeans, a paper bag from the co-op in one hand. He walked to the second unit from the end, unlocked it, and swung the door up. From where I crouched, I could see only flashes. The corner of a tarp, the edge of a cooler, a stack of milk crates. He bent, rummaging. Then his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, answered. Hey, babe, he said, casual. Yeah, I'm just grabbing some gear. Need me to pick anything up? Lena. I felt the words like a stone in my gut. He was talking to her while standing in the middle of whatever Michelle thought would tell me who he really was. He ended the call, set the phone on the crate, and pulled out a black scuffed lockbox, the kind with a keyhole and a handle. He knelt, turned his back to the door, fiddled with it for a minute, then put it back. And that's when I saw it, taped to the inside wall of the unit, just visible when he shifted. A photograph. Even from that distance, I knew the curve of the smile. Renee. He closed the door, locked it, and drove off, and I stayed crouched in the cedar shade until my legs went numb. When I finally stood, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Did you see it? I spun, scanning the street. Nothing. Who is this? I typed, the only one making sure you live long enough to use what you know. Before I could reply, another message came. He's going to ask you to dinner tonight. Say yes, and wear something with pockets. I stared at the screen, the cedar needles sharp with resin in my nose, and realized I'd crossed some invisible line. Whatever happened next wasn't just about Lena's wedding anymore. It was about who was going to make it to the end of these 48 hours at all. The text came from Colin at 5:07 p.m. Dinner tonight? Just us. Been meaning to catch up without wedding talk. 7:30. I'll pick you up. No mention of where, no emoji. That last part, I'll pick you up, wasn't phrased like a question. I typed "Sheer" before I could think too hard about it, then stared at the screen like maybe my phone would reveal some hidden motive. But the earlier anonymous message echoed in my head. Say yes, and wear something with pockets. I dug through my closet until I found the navy dress with deep side pockets I usually wore for cafe catering gigs, the one that looked nice enough for dinner, but could hide a phone, keys, maybe a small notebook. As I pulled it on, I kept replaying what I'd seen in the storage unit. The photograph taped inside. Renee's smile. I hadn't imagined it, but I didn't know if that photo was a trophy or something else entirely. And I didn't know if tonight was about him finding out how much I knew, or about making sure I never got the chance to use it. Colin arrived exactly at 7:30 in the silver pickup, wearing a pale button-down and no jacket. His hair was damp, like he'd showered right before. He opened the passenger door for me with a faint smile. You clean up nice, gatekeeper. he said. I slid in. Where are we going? You'll see. We drove out of Harbor's Edge, past the boardwalk lights, into the darker coastal road lined with pine and scrub grass. The sun had just dropped, leaving a thin smear of pink over the water. He didn't make small talk, just kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting on his thigh. The silence was almost worse than any conversation he could have chosen. After 20 minutes, he pulled into a gravel lot beside a low cedar-shingled building with no sign. Warm light glowed through the windows. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke. This place doesn't have a name, he said, reading my look. Locals call it the Wharf Side. No menu. You eat what the chef made that day. Best scallops you'll ever have. Inside, the dining room was small, maybe 8 tables, the walls lined with old maritime photos. A wood stove flickered in the corner. The hostess greeted him by name, Colin, and seated us in the far corner, partially hidden from the rest of the room. When the waitress left us with water and bread, he leaned forward on his elbows. You've been busy, he said. The words were almost identical to what he'd said on the dock, but this time his tone was different, lighter, almost amused. Looking for answers isn't busy work, I said. He studied me for a moment, then tore a piece of bread in half. You think I keep things from you and Lena because I'm dangerous? That's the conclusion you've already reached. I think you keep things from us because if we knew them, we'd make different choices, I said. He nodded slightly like I'd just passed a test. Fair. The waitress arrived with 2 plates, seared scallops over risotto, steam curling up like a lure. She set down a bottle of white wine, poured for both of us, then disappeared. Colin raised his glass. To family. I didn't drink. To truth, I said instead. He smiled faintly, then set the glass down untouched. You saw the storage unit, he said. My pulse jumped. How do you know? Because Michelle doesn't keep her hands out of other people's pockets, he said. And because you've been carrying yourself like someone who's seen the inside of a locked room they weren't supposed to. He cut into the scallops with surgical precision, ate one bite, then set the fork down. What did she show you? A photo, I said. Of Renee. In your unit. He nodded once like he'd been expecting that. Do you want to know why it's there? I want to know why it's not with the police, I said. Because they already have a copy, he said. She gave it to them. Along with 50 other things she swears are proof. They kept one picture in the file, put the rest in evidence, and never called me again. And you kept it? Yes, he said simply. Because she's not the only one who lost someone that night. That stopped me for half a beat. What does that mean? It means Renee and I weren't alone when we argued. Someone else was there. Someone I cared about. Someone who didn't make it into any of Michelle's stories because she couldn't use him. Him? He leaned back. My brother. Half-brother, technically. We grew up together. He was on the dock that night. And 2 weeks later, he was gone. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Gone how? Same way Renee was, he said. Except nobody looked for him. He didn't have a grieving family posting flyers. He had me. And I couldn't. He stopped. Swallowed. The photo is the last one I have with both of them in it. That's why it's there. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But the memory of Michelle's voice, trophy, was louder. Why tell me this now? I asked. He gave a small, humorless smile. Because I think you've decided which side you're on, and I'd like to know before the wedding if you're going to put a knife in my back. I met his eyes. If I put a knife in your back, it won't be metaphorical. He laughed, sudden and sharp, like I'd said the first thing all night that surprised him. Good, he said. Keep that energy. You're going to need it. The words landed wrong, like a warning wrapped in a compliment. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed in my pocket. One vibration, then another. I slipped a hand into the fabric, shielding the screen from view. Unknown number. A photo. Not a live photo this time, just a still image of tonight's dinner table, taken from above and behind. My navy dress. Colin's bent head. the wine glass in front of me untouched. When I looked up, there was a second wine glass on the counter by the kitchen pass, tilted, catching the light. No one sitting there. Colin was watching me watch. "Another friend of yours?" he asked quietly. I slipped the phone deeper into my pocket, my pulse loud in my ears. "Maybe," I said. And that's when the waitress came back. But instead of refilling water, she leaned down just far enough for me to hear her whisper. "Don't go anywhere with him after this," she said, voice barely moving the air. Then she straightened, smiled, and walked away. The words barely registered before she was gone, weaving back toward the kitchen with her tray. I could still feel the warm ghost of her breath in my ear. I tried not to look at Colin. If he'd noticed, he didn't show it. He was breaking another piece of bread, eyes on the crust like it held some private map. I forced myself to take a bite of scallop, if only so I'd look normal. My jaw moved, but the food might as well have been cardboard. "You're quiet," he said. "Just thinking," I managed. "About what?" "Patterns," I said. "How some people never break them." He gave me a faint smile. "And you think you're the one to break mine?" I set down my fork. "I think I'm the one who's not going to end up in it." We locked eyes. Neither of us moved. Then he glanced toward the kitchen, almost idly. "Interesting choice of restaurant, don't you think? Half the staff here used to work at the marina. Half of them probably have their own opinions about me." "You chose it," I said. He leaned back, still smiling, but his knuckles were pale against the table edge. "Exactly." The door opened, letting in a gust of cool, salt air. A man in a hooded sweatshirt stepped in, shook off the wind, and headed for the bar. I only noticed him because he paused at the counter, speaking quietly to the waitress who'd warned me. She glanced at our table, gave the smallest shake of her head. The man didn't look my way, just walked back outside. Colin noticed. "Friend of yours?" "I don't think so." He went back to eating, but his attention was too sharp. We finished in a silence that wasn't comfortable. The waitress cleared plates, offered dessert. Colin declined for both of us. "She's watching her figure," he said with a wink, which made my skin crawl because it was a thing he'd never said before. When she left, he dropped a few bills on the table and stood. "Let's take the long way back," he said. I stayed seated. "I'm actually going to walk home." His smile didn't change, but the air between us did. "It's 6 miles, Maya." "I need the air," I said. He studied me for a long second, then nodded slowly. "Suit yourself. I'll see you tomorrow." He walked out without another word, the bell over the door jingling like it was just another night. I stayed in my seat for another minute, pretending to scroll my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. Then I paid for my wine and stepped outside. The night had that heavy stillness you get before fog rolls in. Colin's truck was gone. I started walking fast toward the road back into town. I didn't hear footsteps, but after half a block I had that prickling between my shoulder blades, the one that tells you you're not alone. I ducked into the shadow between 2 shuttered shops. Waited. The man in the hoodie passed, not looking my way. Then, a few seconds later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You're welcome." I typed back before I could stop myself. "Who are you?" The reply came quick. "The reason you didn't get in his truck. Keep moving." I made it back into the brighter part of town in 20 minutes, heart still pounding. Every car that slowed made me want to duck into a doorway. When I reached the corner by the cafe, my phone buzzed again. Same number. "Tomorrow, noon. The old ferry pier. Bring what you saw in the storage unit." "Why?" I typed. The reply took longer this time, because I know what's in the lockbox, and I know why he kept it. The old ferry pier hasn't been in use since I was in high school, when the county shut it down for safety concerns. That's a polite way of saying the pilings were rotting and the deck planks had more gaps than wood. Now it's just a place kids dare each other to cross at night, or where people go to smoke what they don't want their parents to smell. By the time I got there, just before noon, fog was curling in off the water, making the whole structure look like it was floating in nothing. I had Michelle's photocopies in an envelope inside my tote. My phone was in my pocket, set to record, my thumb pressed to the button like a talisman. The only sound was the slap of water against the pilings, and the occasional groan of the wood under my feet. Halfway down the pier, a figure emerged from the mist. Not Michelle. This person was taller, broader, wearing the same hooded sweatshirt from last night. He stopped about 10 feet from me. "You have it?" he asked. His voice was low, male, and not familiar. "Depends who's asking," I said, stalling. He looked over his shoulder, scanning the fog. "We don't have long. You were told to bring what you saw." "I was told Michelle would be here," I said. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "She sent me. Colin's been watching her place since this morning." That made my pulse kick harder. "Who are you?" "Someone who used to work with him," he said. "And someone who got smart enough to stop before I ended up like the others." "The others?" I pressed. He took a step closer, enough that I could see his eyes, pale, sharp, darting like a man who knows every shadow might hide trouble. "The people he keeps pieces of," he said. "That lockbox? It's not about money. It's not about legal trouble. It's about control." "What's in it?" He hesitated. "Driver's licenses, jewelry, little things that don't mean much to anyone but the person they belong to. And photos. Always photos." My stomach turned cold. "Of Renee? And not just her," he said. "Women from Savannah, Newport, places you probably haven't even heard he's been. He keeps one thing from each of them. I think it's how he reminds himself he can." The wind picked up, rattling the loose boards under us. Somewhere out on the water, a gull screamed. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because Michelle's right about one thing. He's setting the board, and you're on it. And if you don't move first, you'll end up just another piece in his box." I gripped the tote tighter. "Then help me open it." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You think I want my face anywhere near that unit again? The second he knows it's been touched, he'll burn it all. Then what do I do?" He looked at me for a long moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver key. He held it out, palm open. "You didn't get this from me, and if you use it, be ready for him to know." I took it, the cold metal biting into my skin. "Why now?" He started backing into the fog. "Because I saw your picture." "What picture?" "The one on his phone," he said. "From behind the lobster traps." My breath hitched. "Don't wait too long," he added, then turned and disappeared into the gray. I stood there, the key heavy in my pocket, until the sound of his footsteps faded completely. Then I turned back toward shore and froze. At the base of the pier, where the fog began to thin, a figure was leaning against the railing, watching. Colin. And he was smiling like he'd been there all along. Colin didn't move as I approached. He just stood there with his hands tucked into his jacket pockets, the fog eddying around him like it knew to make space. When I was 10 feet away, he straightened and said almost cheerfully, "You're early." My fingers tightened around the tote strap. "Were you waiting for me?" His smile didn't waver. "I'm a punctual man. And you're a creature of habit. You walk fast when you're lying, slower when you're scared. Today you were walking scared." "I didn't know we had a meeting," I said. He tilted his head toward the mist behind me. "Who was he?" "Who?" "The man you were talking to out there." He said it like we were discussing the weather, but there was a coil in his voice that made my stomach pull tight. I glanced over my shoulder, but the pier was empty now. "You tell me. You're the one who apparently saw him." Colin's eyes narrowed a fraction. "You didn't answer my question. And you didn't answer mine." We stood there in the damp air, neither of us blinking. Then he reached out, palm up, the gesture deceptively casual. "Let me hold your bag." "No." "Maya." The softness in his tone was worse than anger. "If you're carrying something you shouldn't, it's safer if I took a step back. "If you touch this bag, Colin, I swear I will scream so loud half the harbor comes running." He didn't move. Just studied me with that strange clinical calm I'd seen before. "You really think anyone would come?" That question hung between us like a drop of water before it falls. Finally, he let out a slow breath and slid his hands back into his pockets. All right, you're going to do what you're going to do. Just remember something, Maya. If you open a box, you'd better be ready for what comes out. He stepped aside, giving me room to pass. I walked past him, my pulse thundering in my ears, half expecting him to grab me. He didn't. But as I reached the sidewalk, he called after me. You've got 21 hours left. Back in my apartment, I locked the door, bolted it, and shoved a chair under the knob for good measure. The key the man in the hoodie had given me felt like it weighed 5 pounds. I laid it on the kitchen table next to my phone, Michelle's papers, and a sticky note where I scribbled the address of the storage units. My hand was trembling. I knew I should call Lena, tell her everything. But another part of me, the part that kept hearing Michelle's voice and seeing Renee's smile, knew that if I did, Colin would get ahead of me. I had the key. I had the proof. I just had to decide if I could get in and out before he knew. The decision came quicker than I expected. By 2 p.m., I was back in my car, heading toward Bayview Dental's back lot. The storage units sat in their usual silent row. No trucks, no voices, just the cry of gulls overhead and the faint tang of brine. I walked fast to the second unit from the end, slipped the key into the padlock, and felt the click. My heart was hammering so hard I almost didn't hear the sound behind me, gravel shifting under footsteps. I spun, but the lot was empty. When I looked back at the unit, the door was already sliding up, and Colin was standing inside. The metal door rattled up the rest of the way with a sound that felt too loud in the empty lot. Colin stood there in the dim light of the unit, hands loose at his sides, like I'd just interrupted him halfway through some private ritual. Maya, he said, as if we'd simply run into each other at the cafe. You found my key. I froze on the threshold, the cold air from inside the unit smelling faintly of mildew and something metallic. The lockbox sat on top of a stack of milk crates behind him, the black paint worn at the corners. I thought it was yours, I said, because my mouth was moving faster than my brain. It is, he said, stepping aside just enough to gesture toward the interior. Since you came all this way, you might as well see what's inside. I'm tired of playing 20 questions with you. My pulse was a drumbeat in my ears. I stepped in, keeping my back close to the wall, the key still warm in my pocket. Colin knelt, unlocked the box with another key from his jacket, and flipped the lid open. You want the truth? Here. Inside, everything was neatly arranged, like a display. Driver's licenses, maybe a dozen, each in its own clear sleeve. Most were women, a few men, states all over, North Carolina, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Georgia. Next to each sleeve was a small object, a silver locket, a faded ticket stub, a key on a braided cord, a gold hoop earring, and photos. Some were snapshots, others printed from phones. All showed people smiling in different places, on boats, on piers, at parties. In some, Colin was in the frame. In others, he wasn't. I picked one up without thinking. A woman in a yellow sundress on a dock, her hair caught mid-laugh by the wind. The back was marked in neat handwriting, Savannah 2017. Colin watched me. You want to know what all this is? It's my reminder. Of what? My voice came out sharp. That everyone leaves, he said simply. One way or another. Sometimes because they want to, sometimes because they don't get a choice. Either way, they're gone. And this, he gestured to the box, is what's left. I stared at the neat rows, the catalogued scraps of people's lives. And Renee? She's in here too? He reached under the top layer, brought out a small envelope, and slid out a photograph. It was the one I'd seen taped to the wall. Renee, mid-laugh, bracelet flashing in the sun. But now I saw the other people in the frame. A man half turned away, Colin, younger, cleaner shaven, and another man, stockier, wearing the same bracelet Renee had. The resemblance was there if you looked. The set of the jaw, the shape of the eyes. My brother, Colin said quietly. Elias. Nobody ever asked where he went. Not the cops, not Michelle. He didn't matter to anyone but me. What happened to him? Colin closed the envelope. The same thing that happened to Renee. And if I could tell you more, I would. But I wasn't there when it happened. I wanted to believe him. I also wanted to slam the lid shut and run. Why keep all this? I asked. Because if you don't remember the people you lose, you start losing pieces of yourself too, he said. And I can't afford that. Before I could answer, a shadow moved across the unit's doorway. Michelle. She was breathing hard, her eyes flicking from me to Colin to the open box. Move away from him, Maya, she said, her voice low but shaking. Colin didn't even turn. Of course, he murmured. She couldn't resist. Michelle stepped inside, a small canister in her hand. Pepper spray. You don't get to keep their lives in a box, she said. Colin smiled faintly. And you don't get to decide who I remember. The air between them was electric, heavy with years of unfinished conversation. I realized I was standing exactly between them, and that neither of them was looking at me anymore. The storage unit felt smaller with both of them inside, the air tight, the walls closer. The open lockbox sat between us like bait. Michelle's eyes were fixed on Colin, her finger hovering just above the spray trigger. You think holding on to their things makes you the good guy, she said. I think it makes me honest, Colin replied evenly. You're the one who turns grief into theater. That box isn't grief, she shot back. It's trophies. Colin finally looked at me, not at her. And you? What do you see, Maya? My throat tightened. Both of them were waiting for my answer, as if what I said next would decide who was walking out of here with the upper hand. I see pieces of people who aren't here anymore, I said slowly. And I don't know if they left because of you or in spite of you. But I know it's not normal to keep them like this. Michelle's grip on the canister tightened. That's all you need to know. Colin's mouth curved, not quite a smile. If I were guilty, do you think I'd keep evidence in a rented unit under my own name? You don't even keep one name, Michelle snapped. The air vibrated with tension. My hand went instinctively to the tote, fingers brushing the key. That small piece of metal had started all of this. Both of you, I said, my voice sharper now. Stop using me like a mirror to see yourselves. They both froze. I stepped forward, closed the lockbox lid, and picked it up. It was heavier than I expected, the metal cold against my palms. If you want to prove who you are, you can do it without me standing in the middle. Colin's gaze sharpened. Where are you taking that? To someone who doesn't have a stake in which one of you is lying, I said. Michelle's eyes narrowed. And who's that? I didn't answer, because I didn't know. I edged toward the doorway, the box cradled tight. Neither of them moved to stop me, but their eyes stayed locked on each other like the real fight hadn't even started yet. Outside, the daylight felt too bright after the dim unit. My pulse was still pounding as I crossed the gravel toward my car. Halfway there, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. You've got less time than you think. When I looked back, the unit door was already down, sealing both of them, and whatever history they shared, back inside. 3 days after I handed over the lockbox, the sheriff called me in. Not to thank me, not to reassure me, to tell me what they'd found. Most of it was what I'd seen. IDs, trinkets, photographs. But one thing hadn't been in there when I first looked. A thumb drive, tucked under the false bottom. On it, a folder of marina security footage from the night Renee disappeared. The video was grainy, the angle poor, but you could make out the pier under sodium lights. Renee walking fast, hair down, bracelet flashing. Elias, Colin's half-brother, a few steps behind, calling out. Then Colin appeared from the other side, stepping between them. The three argued. No audio, just frantic hand gestures. Elias grabbed Renee's arm, she pulled away. Colin stepped in again, but this time Elias shoved him hard. Colin stumbled into the piling, recovered, and lunged. Not at Elias, but past him, toward Renee. In the struggle, someone's foot caught on a coil of rope. All three went over the side. The camera didn't catch what happened in the water. After 30 seconds, Colin surfaced, dragging Elias. Renee never came up. In the final seconds of the clip, Colin hauled his half-brother onto the dock, looked down at the black water, and then, this part is burned into me, he walked away without looking back. The sheriff leaned back in his chair. We can't prove intent. We can't even prove how she died. But we can prove he didn't save her. And Elias? I asked. Died in the hospital 3 days later, head injury from the fall. So that was the truth Colin never told me. He hadn't lied about losing them both that night. He'd just left out the part where he decided which one got pulled from the dark. They haven't arrested him. Insufficient evidence, they said. Maybe that's true. Or maybe he's already somewhere else, wearing a different name, buying another woman a bracelet with the first letter of a story she'll never know. Lena doesn't wear hers anymore. It's in my drawer, next to Michelle's photocopies. Sometimes I take it out and turn it over in my hand, thinking about that night on the dock. How quickly the water closes over the things you can't get back, and how some people learn to live just fine with what sinks. If you like these stories and videos, make sure to like, comment, and share so we can make some money from ad revenue and continue getting better and better with our publications. We strive to donate a portion of everything we make to charities that make a difference. Let us know if there is someone or thing you want to support. Thank you for staying until the end and enjoying the story.